Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok. That's right. Going live on all of these platforms at once. I'm killing it. And I apologize for being late. I'm really big on consistency, trying to make sure that that things are done in a consistent manner, and that's why Aaron and I are very, very strict about our timelines and strict about our broadcast schedules for Freology because consistency is the key to success. It doesn't matter what it is that you're doing. And for those speaking of consistency, I have a challenge. I started it on Facebook. Can't really put it on TikTok, so I'm talking about it now. But basically, there's a challenge that I'd like to throw down because we're coming up on the end of the year in the 1st of January, everybody's going to make New Year's resolutions, right? I mean, that's what we do. We say we're going to do something different, whether we call it a resolution or not. We're always talking about changing things for the new year. Now, one of the things that I want to do is I want to do what I call the pre-23 challenge. And that is there's a certain number of things that you can do, just simple steps, because it's not, and I repeat, is not the big things that are going to make the big difference in your life. It's the little things, it's tweaking the small details. I always come back to this one analogy that when the astronauts first went to the moon, not Apollo 11 like everybody thinks, but Apollo 10, which was the first actual manned mission to the moon, where they went to the moon and circled around and came back. It was said that they had to perform 100 or more course corrections per minute in order to not be lost in space. I mean, that's really powerful. It just, those little corrections meant the difference between life and death for the Apollo 10 astronauts. So here's the thing. If you can just start with, like Admiral McRaven, former SEAL team commander, he said, start every day by making your bed. You can't change anything if you can't master that one simple step. So just make your bed, starting with making your bed. Have a couple of glasses of water. Take some time to meditate. Make sure that you exercise, that you have an exercise period. And I always believe in stretching before exercise. So have a stretching period before you actually start your morning workout. And little things like that. Journal what you dreamed about or whatever it is that's on your mind. Examine your to-do list. Look at what your day is going to be like and kind of plan your day around that. And then do some things that you like. Read something that's fiction that moves you. Read something that's nonfiction that moves you. Find something that inspires you. Do something for you. If it means, getting a manicure, do it. If it means getting a pedicure, do it. If it means getting a facial, do it. Do some things for yourself, right? So that's one thing. And then during the day, make sure that your body is moving constantly. I work from home and I have a pretty sedentary lifestyle. I mean, I sit at my desk and I'm pretty much chained to it. But I made some investments in myself. I got one of these motorized standing sitting desks. So I can raise this or lower it, and it has 4 different memory positions, so I can set it to exactly where I need it to be for any activity. And I also have some exercise bands here in my office, in addition to the full gym that I have in my garage. Which, when I finish this broadcast, I'm going to go and hit the garage because I'm going to make sure that I get this in, because I want to do some things that get me going, get me prepped for the new year. I don't want to wait till the new year and then start, because then that is procrastination, and that's another subject altogether. But I want to deal with something today that some people are going to be absolutely pissed at this, and I'm going to tell you something. I'm not done with this by any stretch of the imagination. Right now, I'm just scratching the surface. I'm just chipping at the tip of the iceberg, because There is so much more to cover here. And it's basically this: did Jesus ever exist? Now, I know that, man, I have taken so much flack from people over this because the feedback I get is typically this: well, Derrick, virtually all historians agree that Jesus existed. And touche. You're absolutely right. Most historians do agree on that. But the question is, why do they agree? Why is everybody so fixed on this point? Because and the reason why I ask is that there is no evidence whatsoever that Jesus existed, not anything empirical. We have a lot of anecdotal evidence, and I'm going to cover some of that. But there is a growing body of scholarship. I'm talking about real historians, I'm talking about real anthropologists, and even some theologians that now question whether or not Jesus actually existed. And this is a really, really huge deal because essentially the whole of Christianity hinges on this. Even more so, what we call Judeo-Christian values hinge on this. Because if you take this away, this is like the Jenga block that could potentially cause the whole thing to topple. And I'm going to tell you, people don't want anybody talking about this, because once this is out and once people get this and they start digging into this, the jig is up. The ruse is over. The con is gone. And that's the real deal. So here's the thing, right? There is no archaeological, anthropological, or otherwise empirical evidence of Jesus ever existing. It simply doesn't exist. There are no artifacts, no items that belong to Jesus. There are no eyewitness accounts. Now, hear me on this, because the earliest known gospel is the Gospel of Mark, which was said to have been written around 70 CE. In other words, written about the time that Rome sacked Jerusalem. And the rest of the Gospels, Luke and Matthew, are essentially copies of Mark's Gospel with some subtle changes. Now, John went off the reservation a bit, and he had a different portrayal of Jesus. He portrayed a divine Jesus, whereas the other gospel writers, it was more like this was like he was a prophet. He was something special. And then there were some things that were added on in translation and editing. And y'all hear me? Listen, there are people that say, well, there's just as much, if not more, evidence that Jesus existed than there is Julius Caesar. And to that, I call bullshit, because one of the most famous things that Julius Caesar did was he quelled a civil war within Rome with his military campaign where he crossed the Rubicon. And in this campaign, there are provisioning receipts, there are conscription notices, there are a lot of things that attest to Caesar in the crossing of the Rubicon. And this is just one thing. This is just one thing, because there are other things that attest to the existence of Julius Caesar. As a matter of fact, Caesar, we could probably track down where he's buried, dig his ass up, do a little DNA test, and determine if he is who we suspect that he is. But I digress. You know, people say, well, there's just as much evidence that Jesus existed as George Washington. Well, you know, starting with the body, you know, we can go to Mount Vernon and we can dig old George's ass up. Now, I know that's blasphemous to a lot of American patriotic types, but it's true. You can, we have, there are receipts from where George Washington bought and sold slaves. There are real estate transactions, and there are eyewitness accounts. There are letters between George Washington and John Adams and so on and so forth that are evidence. There are firsthand accounts of George Washington's existence. There are firsthand accounts of Julius Caesar's existence. There are firsthand accounts of Alexander the Great. You know, there just isn't anything, because, and again, all the earliest gospel that we have is 70 CE, which is almost 50 years after Jesus allegedly died. I mean, that's the math. Now, here's the other thing. People will say, well, there were people that wrote about Jesus. Yeah, but they weren't contemporaries of Jesus. They weren't people that lived at the same time, because the first person that always gets trotted out is Flavius Josephus. Now, Flavius Josephus, let's just say, get some things out of here. He was born Yosef ben Mattiyahu. And I'm probably butchering that pronunciation. But how did he become Flavius Josephus? Because that's clearly a Roman name, right? Because basically, Flavius Josephus was a traitor to the Israeli state, or the Jewish state. Josephus was a traitor, and because he was such a good traitor, the Flavian dynasty of Roman emperors basically adopted him, or they patronized him, which meant that he got to use the Flavian name, hence Flavius Josephus. So first of all, we're dealing with somebody that clearly has an axe to grind, you know. So, and then on top of that, he was very Jewish. Basically, he was not the kind of guy that would ascribe any credibility to Jesus. And this is where theologians and historians all pin their hopes on this. There's a passage in the Antiquities of the Jews, a historical document that Josephus wrote. And in that, there is a passage that is called the Testimonium Flavianum. And that Testimonium Flavianum basically says there was this man, Jesus, who was called Christ, who did many great works, and that he was buried and he was raised from the dead. The only problem with that is that if you look at the Antiquities in context, because back when I was preaching, we were taught what's called the 20/20 rule, that anytime you are using a passage of scripture on which to build a text, that you examine and study 20 verses before it and 20 verses after it. Why? Because context matters. You need to have your contextual ducks in a row. And this is not just preaching, y'all, but this is anything. If you're going to give a TED Talk, if you're going to give a keynote speech, if you're going to speak to children at an elementary school, you really need to have your shit together and know what the context is of which you speak and understand the audience of whom you are speaking it to. Now, see, that's another thing, because Flavius Josephus was writing at the behest of the Flavian Caesars. That was his motivation. He was there to provide some historical context for his masters. So what he wrote cannot be considered unbiased, because it clearly was. But I digress, because this particular passage, what's called the Testimonium Flavianum, most theologians and historians, while they debate on how much of it is truly authentic and what isn't, all of them are basically in lockstep in saying this is not totally true, not totally authentic. And I have a theory, and my theory revolves around a fellow by the name of Eusebius. Eusebius was was Constantine's chief bishop, and he was the guy that basically, he was sort of the MC, or the special master of the Council of Nicaea. And Eusebius, don't take my word for it, look it up. Eusebius was really a flawed character. I'm going to say he was really kind of a fucked up guy. And there's a lot of speculation that Eusebius either wrote the Testimonium or he commissioned it. But either way, his fingerprints are all over that. Josephus was born in 37 CE. Now, it is suspected that Jesus died somewhere between 30 and 33 CE. So that means that Josephus was born, I don't know, 7 years, 4 years after Jesus died, which means that he wasn't an eyewitness to anything. And moreover, that if he had been an eye, or let me put it this way, even if he were to have spoken to someone who's an eyewitness, certainly you get more out of it than the testimonium. I'm just saying, because here's the thing. I have been, I don't know how you say it, blessed or whatever, but I've met several men who either were or became the president of the United States. I didn't meet any of these guys while they were president. I either met them after they were president or before they became president. I had a chance to shake Bill Clinton's hand and to speak to George W. Bush and to meet George Bush the elder. So here's the thing. I've actually witnessed these guys with my eyes. So if somebody tells me, well, George W. Bush didn't really exist, he was a CGI, well, I could say that that's wrong, because I know I've actually met the man. Okay. And when you have met somebody, I mean, how many of you have that story when you met a celebrity? And many of you do. I know I do. I've met many celebrities in my lifetime. And I can recall with crystal clarity everyone that I met and the conversations that I had with them. Now, if Josephus actually met somebody who was an eyewitness to Jesus, and that this was an important subject and something that mandated chronicling, then maybe that would be written down. I mean, at least that's what I would think. Well, y'all tell me what you think. I'm curious. Now, again, this is Josephus, right? And Josephus wrote something also about the brother of, or James, the brother of Jesus, who was called Christ. And again, we're taking a shard of a text or a shard of an encounter and building an entire thesis around it, which, if you know anything about academics, you know that that is tantamount to a flawed premise. You can't, when if you try to write a college level paper with that level of evidence, that level of citation, you're going to fail. You're going to fail. But let me keep going, because there's more, right? The next person that Christians like to trot out is Tacitus, is Publius Cornelius Tacitus. And he was considered to be one of the greatest Roman historians. And Tacitus was born around 96 CE, which is like 70 years plus after the alleged death of Jesus. And he wrote something concerning Jesus, but it wasn't even secondhand. It was totally anecdotal. But here, these are the two sources that most Christians go to when they're trying to defend their Jesus. And here's this, the other thing too, is that if Jesus is risen from the dead, if he's sitting on the throne of God with all power, it's like we used to preach, or I used to preach, surely he could come and clear all of this shit up. If he was the dude that came back from the grave. Now, here's another thing, right? This is a bonus. This is bonus material, because I just thought about this, but I want to make sure I cover it. You know, there were allegedly 3 people who Jesus raised from the dead: Jairus' daughter, the widow's son, and Lazarus. Now, of the 3, Lazarus, his story continued on in the book of John. And it was important because there were people who sought to kill Lazarus because of what Jesus allegedly did for him, but they were also looking to kill Jesus for what he allegedly did for Lazarus. So here's a guy that was, you know, walking and talking with Jesus and all of this other stuff. And let me just throw this out here, some more bonus material, that there is some historical scholarship that alleges that John didn't write the book of John, but it was Lazarus who wrote the book of John, because it was the disciple whom Jesus loved. Why did Jesus love John so much? But clearly, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus were all close friends of Jesus. I would say that they were probably his high school buddies, or maybe his childhood buddies. They grew up together. I don't know. I wasn't there. I'm speculating. This is inference here. But hey, all of Christianity is inference, so I'm in good company. But I digress. Here's the thing. If Lazarus was raised from the dead, don't you think that it would make sense for him to say something about what was on the other side? He was undertaken for 4 days, because Jesus beat his record, allegedly. he got into the biblical book of world records. But anyway, Lazarus didn't say anything about it, and he didn't say anything about it in what was chronicled about him being around Jesus. But even more to the point, if he actually wrote the book of John and didn't cover that, that's a complete fuck up in terms of, chronicling scholarship. So here we have Tacitus, who wrote something scant and thin about Jesus. And here we have Josephus, who wrote something scant and thin about Jesus. And this is not just Christians. This is where historians, anthropologists, theologians all hang their relative hats. Okay. All right. So you have all of these guys, and then you have the construct of the Roman Church, the what was birthed from the Council of Nicaea, and this became the paradigm for Christian organization. Now, what this Christian organization did is they created institutes of higher learning, because what they did was they created a priestly caste that these were the guys that were taught, trained, instructed on how to hear from God. And this becomes the paradigm for higher education. And pretty much until you get to the settling of the New World, such as it is, you don't really have what you call a secular university. Virtually all institutes of higher learning up until about the 1800s were all spiritual, Christian in their viewpoint. So all of these schools, whether they are teaching theology or whether they are teaching arts or humanities or sciences, they've got some skin in that game. They have a vested interest in keeping the lie going. Now, fast forward to the 21st century. Now, I'm going to say this because I don't know this guy, but I'm going to cite him, and that is Bart Ehrman. And personally, I think that Bart Ehrman is an awesome writer and scholar. Let me say that clearly for the record. And Ehrman said, and a lot of atheists quote this, that there is no archaeological, anthropological evidence. There's no empirical evidence that says Jesus existed. But what Ehrman goes on to say is that because of the other records that we have of Jesus, that we have to conclude that he actually existed. And he has become the Christian straw man. And I'm sure that he didn't really want that. He does, and I'd be willing to bet that he's really not too keen on wearing that title, but it sells a lot of books and it's made a good living for him. Now, I'm not saying that to impugn his integrity. Again, I have mad respect for Ehrman. However, I don't have any respect for the whole Jesus myth. I just don't. Because this is why it matters. Because this is something that I get some blowback that I get from Christians. They say, "Well, Derrick, if it doesn't really matter, let people believe what they believe." And at a certain level, I'm okay with that, except Christianity has demonstrated a zeal for power. And because it has this zeal for power, that anything that it can do to wrest power and retain power, it will do. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And the Christian church has had absolute power for most of modern history. And this is why it matters, because we have reached a point now where information is so profuse, diffuse, prolific, that you can pretty much find out anything if you're willing to do some digging. And the tools are so great. I mean, Google, man, listen, Google has transformed everything, because now you can find out just about anything with a Google search, and you can vet things. See, for example, if you say, I work for the State Department, well, you can do a Google search and find out whether or not I actually work for the State Department. You can verify that. And if I did work for the State Department, well, hey, good on me, shame on you. But it isn't really shame on you, because you did the work, and that's cool. That's appreciated. But if you do the work and you find out that I never worked for the State Department, well, hey, then my credibility has been tarnished. And so I've said this before, and I'll say it again, that anything that can't withstand a Google search, it isn't worth believing. And I really believe, let me say this, let me start, and I'll tell you, this is how bad conditioning is, right? Because I'm used to saying believe, and I'm trying to wean myself off that, because I don't believe anything. I have confidence in what is tangible, measurable, and repeatable. And if it isn't one of those three, I'll accept whether or not it can be modeled mathematically or scientifically. In other words, I've never seen a black hole up close, but I know that they exist because there is scientific evidence that supports them. And there are also mathematical models that illustrate what they do. So I have never seen a black hole, but I think that they exist because of the preponderance of scientific empirical evidence, and also a standard models that can be repeated over and over again. So I don't believe anything. I don't believe in anything. I don't believe in God. I don't believe in Jesus. I don't believe in any of this stuff. But it all matters, because if this Jesus is proven to be a myth, then Houston, we got a problem. So let me pull something else up real quick, because there are two books that I'm going to cite here. One is called Nailed, and it's 10 Reasons Why Jesus Never Existed by David Fitzgerald. And there are people that will lambaste Fitzgerald's scholarship. But from where I sit, if I look at his bibliography, if I look at his footnotes, if I look at what he researched, I would conclude that he did the work. And the other one, let me see. I didn't. Yeah, Richard Carrier. Richard Carrier. Richard Carrier has written several books that basically reduce Jesus to myth. And his scholarship, his research is not up for debate. Even the people that disagree with him agree that he did the work. They just don't agree with the outcome. And that's fine, because this is what I think about knowing things, right? That you know something until you know something better. Once you have superior knowledge, intellectual honesty will lead you to let the newer and superior knowledge displace what you knew or believed before. See, this is how, how can I say it? Christianity believes in this in drive, but they don't believe in it in reverse. What do I mean by that? In other words, what Christianity teaches you is that you had a twisted, warped perspective about yourself, about humanity, and about the world. And the only correction, the only cure for that is accepting Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. In other words, Christianity is telling you that you have to let superior knowledge displace your inferior knowledge. Now, that's in drive. But back it up, throw it in reverse. I wish I could say it like Missy Elliott, because she, back up, flip it in reverse. Y'all hear me? Christianity doesn't believe in any knowledge superior to it, or probably more to the point, it may acknowledge it, it may know it, but it'll never let you get it. And most churches, they'll tell you, hey, well, study the Bible, study it for yourself. But then when you come up with something that contradicts what your pastor taught or what your denomination teaches, then what they're going to tell you is you need to go back and pray about that, Brother Derrick. You need to go back and think on it. You need to study more. Or maybe you should talk to brother so-and-so or sister so-and-so, because they were once where you are, where they were questioning things, but they got the revelation of the Holy Ghost. and they overcame this devilish thinking that you have. So, in other words, they believe it in drive. They just don't believe it in reverse, because here's the thing. Any situation that you drive into, if you don't wreck the car, you can back out of. And y'all should write that one down, because here's the thing. A lot of you haven't been wrecked yet. And that's good. It's good if you haven't been wrecked. Man, you get goodie points on your car insurance for not having a wreck. But Christianity, in particular, religion in general, there are plenty of people that have gone in and completely wrecked their vehicle to where they don't know whether they're coming or going anymore. They don't know what's good or what's bad, because they came into this thing thinking that they were in the throes of absolute good, and it turned out that it wasn't. It turned out that they found out what was really under the kimono. They found out the level of fuckery that Christianity is built on. And so now they're wrecked. They don't know what to believe. And so now you have this thing that's going on. It's called deconstruction. And deconstruction is the sexy topic in the Christian church. It is the thing that everybody, basically everybody say, hey, you got to deconstruct, you got to change your mind about who God really is and what Jesus really is and all of this other stuff. And so now you get some things. This is where it gets really interesting, where the slope gets really, really slippery. And I'm not talking about like a slip and slide, which that's a lot of fun. I like those kind of slippery slopes. But when you'll hear a lot of deconstructionists talk about, well, this part of the Bible was clearly metaphorical, or this was clearly allegorical, but we're supposed to accept Jesus's death, burial, resurrection, his crucifixion, burial, resurrection as an empirical fact, because this is an important tenet to our faith. So you have to believe that is, and then Paul's teachings, and I'm on the record of saying this, but for everybody that hasn't heard this before, fuck Paul, because Paul was a thief. What Paul was a Jewish Pharisee that basically he had a moment where he realized if you can't beat them, join them. That was the whole Damascus Road experience. It wasn't Jesus knocking him off his horse. Jesus was dead, and nobody else saw anything. There's nobody to corroborate Paul's story. And who wrote Paul's story? Paul did. And, we ascribe the book of Acts to Luke, but I don't think that Luke is the entire author of the whole thing, because you'll find that there's a point in the book of Acts where the whole thing just really kind of changes gears. It goes from the early church to all about Paul. And so anyway, Paul's a thief. Paul's a liar. Paul hijacked this movement behind some prophet named Joshua and turned it into this great big thing that others like Constantine saw this and say, hey, this could be the thing that I need to, really rev up the empire. And this is why it matters, because now you have these people that believe in this myth that they are dictating public policy. They want to determine who can marry whom. They want to determine reproductive rights. They want to determine whether or not people can be discriminated against based on the color of their skin. They want to determine what people can read or what people can consume as far as information or entertainment. These people want to control everything. And this is why it's important, because just like the story of the emperor's new clothes, the emperor is strutting around like a peacock, thinking that he's got it going on, thinking that he's sharper than the Silver Fox Squad, thinking that he's got more swagger than any rapper, thinking that he's pretty like Ricky. But he's butt, booty, naked. There ain't shit covering religion but bullshit. And here's what happens is that when people realize that what is oppressing them has no power, what happens is, and this is an historical precedent, that people shit can it. They ditch it. They drop it like a bad habit, because it is a bad habit. This is why it matters. Now, again, I would encourage you to go and look up. Let me see. Richard Carrier, his books. One is, and I'm reading this now on the historicity of Jesus, which is really really good. And then David Fitzgerald's book, it's called Nailed. 10 myths or 10 things that expose Jesus's myth. And those aren't the only books there are. If you look up Jesus mythicism, you'll find a whole lot more work. If you do a Google search on that, and here's the funny thing: if you go to Wikipedia, there's a whole article set aside or written for that. And the funny thing is that the article says that this is something, it's not the viewpoint of most historians. And let me tell you this, if you don't already know this, just because a lot of people believe it doesn't mean it's right. You got a lot of fuckers that believe QAnon, and we know that that's bullshit. You got people that believe that the world is flat, and we know that that's bullshit. So just because the masses follow it, you got to be careful, because sometimes the M in masses is silent. Sometimes you got to be careful. So I also understand this, that there are a lot of people who make their bones, earn a living on perpetuating the Jesus story. And honestly, I don't want to snatch the rug out from anybody's living unless they're doing something that harms others. And here's the thing. I believe that there are some people out here that write about Jesus and Jesus related shit that are not bad people. They're actually good people. I know several of them. I would call them out by name, but I'm not going to do that this time. I do that enough already. Those of you who follow me, y'all know who some of these folks are. But these folks are not really Christians. They're outliers. That if you were to draw a bell curve representing Christianity, with the meaty part being most Christians, people like I'm describing that write these books that try to help people navigate all the pitfalls of deconstruction and all of the things that cause question and concern about what's in the Bible. These people are not in the bell curve at all. Matter of fact, they're definitely not in the fat part of the bell curve, and they're not even in the tails. They're outliers. They're off in the ether someplace. They'd be scatter patterns outside of the bell curve. Why? Because these people are purple unicorns. In terms of Christianity, they don't exist. And I can prove that too, because a lot of these folks that when they write books or they do lectures, the people that attack them are not atheists, they're not Muslims, they're not Jewish, they're Christians. And increasingly, they are progressive Christians, which I'm going to talk about that in another episode, because progressive Christianity is the absolute worst kind. There are some people that are progressive and they hold on to some vestige of Christ, but they're not Christians. They're not Christians. And the proof of that, again, is that when they speak, their attackers are the Christians. So that's where I'm going to stop. But I'm going to go through here and read some of these comments. And I don't have a whole lot of comments. I'm trying to see what else do we have here. It's kind of hard to do this on TikTok and look at the comments. Let me see. Let me go through here. I'm going to read some of these comments here from TikTok first. Dwayne Gray Poem says, I was thinking of that today. That's crazy. I guess faith is totally necessary. Faith only survives on bullshit. Pedro Lopez says, repent every day. Jesus Christ love you. Pray to the Lord and Savior. God bless you. You know what, man? Fuck God. Honestly, I mean, because, and I'm not saying that as if I'm trying to cast aspersions on somebody that exists. There is no God. That's the thing. Manny Franz says, what about the Holy Grail? Well, what about the Holy Grail? Has anybody found the Holy Grail? And if so, are they able to extract anything from it that concludes conclusively that it is actually the chalice that Jesus drank from? I don't think so. The TikToker says, main thing to prove is not that a Jesus ever existed, but if Jesus ever came back from death. I don't know, tomato. Here's the thing. If he didn't exist at all, then that means this whole thing was spun out of whole cloth. And that's what I believe. I believe that it's absolute, complete, and total bullshit. Dwayne Gray Poem says, where are the items that belong to the devil? Oops, hold on. Let's see. Heavenbound 947 says, because of how clever God proves that he is Lord, as well as Apostle Paul's conversion, Jesus spoke. Thank you for that word salad. And Heavenbound also says, and of course, you wouldn't be here speaking with us tonight if not for him. No, that's bullshit. I'm here because of a series of biological and electrochemical processes that I can prove. Mr. A. Smith says, I can't say who my ancestors were, but I'm aware of their existence at one point. You know what? Here's the thing. My great-grandfather is John Hill Stuttermeyer Sr., and he is the son of Lou Stuttermeyer, who was a slave, right? So my great-grandfather was born a slave. His mother was a slave, but my great-grandfather wore the light skin of his mother having been raped by the slave master. And hence, that's why I am as melanin challenged as I am. Dave Webb says, so what should we pray to? Do you believe in a higher power? Fuck prayer. Why are you praying? Live your life. Do what you need to do. You don't need to pray to anything. And no, there's no higher power. There's nothing greater than yourself. Let's see. Heavenbound 947 says, let Jesus, aka God Almighty, grip your heart, brother. Don't fight it. Just let him listen. I'm gonna tell you something. I've been around Jesus probably a lot longer than you have, buddy, and know more about Jesus and my little finger than you do in your whole universe. And I know that it's bullshit empirically. And then Heavenbound 947 says, do you believe Satan exists? This guy's full of great comments. No, I don't believe that Satan exists. And I believe that Christians that believe in a literal devil, they have an imaginary friend that has an imaginary friend. I mean, that's like, 50 shades of stupid. So now let's go to Facebook and let's look at the comments here. Atheist Mo says, hi, my irreligious life says, yep. Dr. Michael J. Thomas, he was my guest 2 weeks ago on Atheist Thursday. Dr. Mike, I appreciate you. You are, man, I really love and admire you. Chris Terrell, thanks for joining. Chris is a cat that he was once a preacher, and I think Chris is about to get escape velocity from this bullshit. But that's another story. I just keep going, keep doing what you're doing, Chris. I'm with you, and I'm here for you. Leo Roussel Duplessis says, I missed the name of the first one. The first historian. I talked about two historians, Flavius Josephus and Publius Cornelius Tacitus, aka Tacitus, that they are the two historians. And I talked about David Fitzgerald and Richard Carrier, that they are two authors at the forefront of the Jesus myth theory. Jennifer Eileen says, glad you're speaking out on this. Michelle Cooper says, thank you. Jennifer Aline says, you can say that again, Derrick. Please, please expand on the biological processes one day. I sure will. Gail Rayford says, you are sick. No, I'm not sick. Here's the thing. Now that you've heard it, you can't unhear it. This is going to be in your head. This is going to live rent-free in the real estate of your mind for the rest of your life, because now you can't unsee it. Jennifer Eileen says, book idea for you to write 50 Shades of Stupid. You know what? I'm working on the sequel to my original book, Deconstructing Religion. It's going to be called Deconstructing Religion Part 2, and they'll have some catchy subtitle. I wanted to call it Burn That Shit to the Ground in the subtitle, but somebody said, people will look at that and they'll never buy the book. But then again, maybe they might, because that's a catchy subtitle. Oh, Richard Carrier. The other one, Leah, is David Fitzgerald. And let me do this too. I'm going to copy this link and drop this link in here. So I want to put that there. And then let me go out to Facebook, because I'm doing this through Restream, which Restream is a streaming platform that allows me to stream to multiple platforms simultaneously. So I'm on my personal page, Derrick Day. I'm on my public page, Derrick Day Multimedia. I'm on YouTube and I'm on Twitter all at the same time. And I'm also on TikTok, because I've got my phone up here and doing this thing from here. So let's see. I'm trying to, let's go here and here in the comments. I'm going to drop this in here. So there's this link that I just dropped in. You folks on TikTok, sorry, I don't really know how to do this, how to invite people in or whatever. Otherwise I would, but here's the thing. If you're watching on Facebook, you can click the link, or watching on YouTube, you can click the link and you'll show up in my green room on Restream, and then I can add you in. And it doesn't matter to me whether you agree or disagree, or whether you think that, hey, I'm on fire, I'm making some great points, or whether you think I'm full of shit. I don't care. You can come on, as long as you're respectful. You can come on. You can have your 5 minutes of fame or whatever. Somebody wants to join in. This is Elvira Ran 800. Oh, she just left. I didn't hit it fast enough. That was on Restream though. So Elvira, if you want to try that again, you can join in. Yep. Fitzgerald and Carey are both great authors. Stay tuned, because I'm actually in direct contact with David Fitzgerald, and I'm working on doing something with him, and I'm in contact with Carrier's people. So stay tuned, because ultimately I like to have them come on, because they will explain this a lot better than I do. So anybody else want to join in? My Religious Life says, awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate you. But here's the thing. Those of you who are atheists, please share this video. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button, click the bell for notifications, so that every time I go live that you'll catch this, especially on Thursdays and Fridays, because Thursdays, again, I do the Atheist Thursdays. On Friday, I do Phreology Friday with my friend and brother, Aaron Tomlinson. And also Aaron does his own shindig on Sundays, which he doesn't have a name for yet, but he will. I'm talking to you, Aaron. He will. And if you want to get down on some real deep metaphysical shit, Aaron is your guy. I mean, he is the guy. he is the guy. He is not only one of my best friends, but he is one of the most intelligent and thorough people that I know. So I don't know if anybody joining, going once, going twice. Um, okay. Let me see. No. Let's see. Is there anybody else? No, nobody else. So I'm going to go ahead and check out. Be happy, be well. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. And be sure to tune in tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 Central, 5 Mountain, 4 Pacific, for Freeology Friday, where Aaron Tomlinson and I will get together and we'll talk about something. And we have a couple of subjects in mind. We haven't actually finalized it yet, but we do before we come on and we get down. We have a good time, and also we do a lot of drinking and we do a lot of cussing. So I didn't cuss nearly as much as I do during Freeology. But anyway, you're welcome to join. Okay. So until the next time, peace and hair grease.